All right, let's get right into it. There's a new fuel that's been rolled out all across India, and, well, it's causing a huge debate. It's called E20, and if you own a vehicle, you're going to want to understand what this is all about.
So yeah, in 2024, E20 fuel became the new standard. It's a mix, 80% petrol, 20% ethanol. But here's the real kicker. It's not optional. If you've got a petrol car or bike, this is the fuel you have to use now. Period.
And that, right there, raises the big question. On one hand, the government is selling this as a huge win for the environment and for the economy. But on the other hand, drivers, well, they're reporting some serious problems. So which is it? Is this a smart, green policy for the future, or is it just creating a massive headache for regular people? Let's break it all down.
Okay, first things first. What exactly is this E20 fuel we're all talking about?
It's pretty simple, really. E20 is a blend, 80% regular old petrol and 20% ethanol. Now, ethanol is basically a kind of alcohol that works as a biofuel. You make it by fermenting crops that are packed with sugar or starch. Think corn, rice. But the real champion is sugarcane. It gives you the most bang for your buck, the highest yield. So we're basically mixing a farm-grown fuel into our gasoline.
So why? Why would the government make such a massive, sweeping change to the country's fuel supply? Let's take a look at the official story.
The government's whole argument really boils down to three main points. They say it's way better for the environment, it saves the country a ton of money, and it gives a major boost to our farmers. I mean, on paper, that all sounds pretty great, right?
And they've got the numbers to back it up. India's official policy think tank, Niti Aayog, claims ethanol slashes greenhouse gas emissions by 65% compared to petrol. That's a huge number. And economically, they say it's cut down our need for imported oil, saving the country over ₹1 trillion. At the same time, it supposedly put another ₹1 trillion right into the pockets of farmers. The key thing here is that the government's case looks really strong, very data-driven.
But the second E20 fuel actually hit the pumps, a completely different story started coming out. Not from officials, but from the people actually pumping this stuff into their cars.
This is the kind of comment that just exploded online. People immediately started noticing they weren't getting nearly as far on a full tank of gas. This quote right here, it perfectly sums up the #1 complaint we've heard, a sudden, really noticeable drop in mileage.
And we're not just talking about a few grumpy people on Twitter. A massive survey of over 36,000 drivers found that 2 out of every 3 people said their vehicle's mileage got worse after they started using E20. 2 out of 3. That's a huge majority.
And here's where the official story and the real-world experience just don't line up. The government's own estimates said, hey, you might see a tiny drop, maybe 1 or 2% for new cars. But what did that survey find? 44% of drivers, almost half, reported a mileage drop of more than 10%. That's not a small difference. That's a real hit to your wallet every single month.
So, what's going on here? Why the problems? Well, there are a few technical reasons. For starters, scientifically, ethanol just doesn't pack the same punch as petrol. It produces about 30% less energy. That alone is going to hurt your mileage. But the bigger issue? Most cars and bikes on the road today were never designed to run on E20. Only vehicles made since 2023 are officially E20 compliant. For everyone else, ethanol can be a real problem because it loves to attract water, which can lead to rust, corrosion, and can even eat away at rubber parts and fuel lines over time.
And this, of course, leads to another giant mess. If your car gets damaged, who's going to pay for it? A lot of car manuals actually warn you not to use fuel with more than 10% ethanol. We've seen conflicting statements from car makers and insurance companies, leaving people totally confused. Will your warranty cover it? Will your insurance? Nobody seems to have a straight answer.
But beyond all the technical issues and the cost to consumers, the source material we're looking at raises an even more serious question. Could a potential conflict of interest be the real reason this policy was pushed through so fast?
Just look at this timeline. It shows you just how fast this whole thing was accelerated. A target that was originally set way out in 2030 was suddenly pulled forward to 2025, and then it was rolled out even earlier, in 2024. The source connects this incredible speed to some very consistent lobbying, especially from Union Minister Nitin Gadkari, who was pushing for more ethanol even before he was in the government. And this is the absolute core of the allegation raised in the source material. It points out that the minister, who has been the biggest and loudest champion for this ethanol policy, has direct family connections to the ethanol industry. His sons run companies that actually produce and sell ethanol.
The financial data that the source highlights is, well, it's pretty eye-opening.
One of the publicly traded companies run by the minister's family has seen its revenue and its profits grow nearly 5 times faster than the average for the rest of the industry. So you can see why this raises some serious questions about who really stands to benefit the most from a mandatory E20 fuel policy.
Now, to be clear, the source isn't arguing that using ethanol is a bad idea in itself. The country really could see some benefits. The problem wasn't the what, it was the how. The way this was rolled out was, to put it mildly, deeply flawed.
Let's just look at Brazil for a second. They're a world leader in using ethanol fuel, but it took them almost 50 years, 50, to gradually get their blend up to E27. That slow, careful process gave car manufacturers and, more importantly, consumers decades to adapt. India, on the other hand, we made the jump from 10% to 20% in just 3 years.
And this point from the source is probably the one that stings the most for the average person. The government is saving trillions by not importing as much oil, and they kept promising that ethanol would make fuel cheaper. But that hasn't happened. People are paying the same price at the pump for a fuel that gives them worse mileage.
So how could this whole thing have been done better? The source suggests 3 pretty simple, common-sense fixes. First, just give people more time. Stick to the original 2030 deadline. Second, if the government is saving all this money, pass some of those savings along and make E20 cheaper. And third, maybe the most important, give people a choice. Let them decide if they want to use E20 or a different blend.
Which leaves us with this final, really important question. This whole E20 story, it's not just about fuel, is it? It's really a case study in how public policy gets made. And it forces us all to ask, when a government is trying to achieve a big national goal, whether it's for the environment or the economy, what's its responsibility to make sure that individual citizens aren't the ones stuck paying the entire price? That's definitely something to think about.